If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Weight training puts a tremendous stress on the body, a stress that stimulates growth, but that can also lead to injury if not properly managed. Most Americans don't exercise enough. In this episode, though, Corbin and I discuss an article from Livestrong.com titled, "Is it actually safe or effective to do a full body workout every day?"
Dr. Armstrong, you often talk about high-frequency training.
That is correct. I have long promoted daily and in some cases, multiple training sessions. I would preface that, however, by saying that I think there should be at least one day off from training per week.
So what are your thoughts then on this article with Livestrong.com titled, "Is it actually safe or effective to do a full body workout every day?"
Ooh, I think this is a great topic for the Aging Well podcast.
The article seems to speak against doing full body workouts every day. Do you disagree with that?
Yes and no.
Okay. Explain.
Well, as with any exercise program, we must consider the individual, their goals, and their constraints.
So some people may benefit from a full body workout every day. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Sounds good. Where do you want to start?
The article quotes Alex Viada. You are a big fan of Alex Viada, yeah?
I am, and I often recommend his book, The Hybrid Athlete. What does he say?
He says, when you're training a muscle, it's constantly undergoing stress. The muscle fibers are pulling on each other, and some damage is inevitable. The article goes on to talk about fibroblasts, the inflammatory process, and how this inflammatory process makes muscle grow. The article continues with a quote from Jason White, PhD, Associate Professor, and Director of the Performance Science of Ohio University. He says, training total body on a daily basis doesn't allow the proper recovery between training days, and when you don't allow yourself to recover, you don't allow the growth to take place during the recovery. It sounds like a day or two of rest between training days might be necessary.
Again, yes and no. For the most part, the article is addressing whole body training sessions that are quite intensive. So long lifting sessions involving multiple exercises and sets going to failure.
By failure, you mean taking the muscles to the point of exhaustion?
Correct. And we sometimes call this volitional fatigue or momentary muscular failure. Serious weightlifters sometimes beat the crap out of their bodies in a lifting session. In the article, Viada says, for a lot of people, they don't want to grind their legs into the dirt twice a week. They just want a constant level of stimulus. They don't like falling down the stairs after leg day. That's not part of their lifestyle. You can do full body workouts 3, 4, even 5 times a week. Just rotate your emphasis. To me, it's really more a question of what are you doing in the workouts and what are you doing in recovery than simply a question of how many times per week do you train.
And sleep and nutrition?
Exactly. So one of the things I talk a lot about, particularly in my exercise physiology classes, are the landmark volumes that I got from Dr. Michael Isertel. Kind of the two most important are the ones that kind of create what I call the golden zone, or what they call the golden zone of training, where we have a minimum effective volume. That's the volume of training that is necessary in order to stimulate a level of growth. And then you have your maximum recoverable volume, which is the maximum volume of work that you can do in a given session or during a week and still recover to be able to come back and do the next targeted session. And so when we're talking about training frequency, we have to consider the idea of recovery. If I do a workout 3 days a week, I can have a certain volume in that workout, and I'm able to recover from, say, Monday's workout and be able to do Wednesday's workout. But if I did that same workout Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then I might start kind of pushing my body toward a point of overtraining. So it's what volume am I doing in a single workout and be able to recover as I prepare for the next workout. So I could take that 3 days of workouts, 2 or 3 days of workouts, and spread that over 6 days. And I might actually end up doing a little bit more volume of work, but I'm able to recover from that volume from day to day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But I feel like the average person isn't going to be training to that level of fatigue.
Well, what level of fatigue are you talking?
I'm talking about to the point of actual exhaustion where they can't do anymore, like a Mike Metzer training versus an Arnold Schwarzenegger training, right? Mike Metzer's pushing it to the absolute level of fatigue and then takes a day off. Arnold was more like, no, I'm just going to do as many reps as possible and just kind of push myself and then get after it again the next day.
Well, you have a lot of bodybuilders that really push themselves to that point of not being, they're falling down the stairs because on leg day, they just destroy themselves. And I remember once back in high school, I trained Nautilus in high school. So there's Mike Metzger, actually it was Art Jones, high intensity. I don't know why Mike Metzger gets all the credit for it anymore, but, we would do workouts where you would do about 8 to 10, maybe 12 exercises, one set to failure, sometimes do 4 sets where you're just pushing yourself beyond failure. And at the end of those workouts, your body was mush. And I remember one time we decided to bike to the gym, which was a fair distance from where we lived. I think it was at least probably 5 to 8 miles. And biking was no big deal. I mean, it's Pittsburgh, so it was a lot of uphill biking. So it was a pretty good workout. But what we hadn't factored in was having to bike home after that workout. And the whole workouts would just totally fatigue your body. So your legs were like jello and you're trying to pedal your bike home. It was rough. I mean, I was really wobbly on the bike.
Yeah, that sounds rough.
Now, I could not do those workouts every day. And if you look into some of the training that Mike Metzger talked about, a lot of times it might only be 1 day of training a week on some of these body parts because you so tear up the body. That's not what we're talking about training every day. If you're going to do that every day, yes, there's going to be issues with it. But if we take that volume, that's those same exercises and spread them over 6 instead of 1 day, you can potentially get better results out of that as long as the muscle is recovering. And, one group to look at is the Bulgarians. When you look at like Bulgarian training, they're actually training the same muscle groups multiple times a day over the course of the week and doing it pretty intensely. But the way they manage recovery and, it's like one exercise and then they're resting for several hours and then they come and do another exercise and then they repeat it the next day. They're manipulating some of the different components of the exercise from day to day. So maybe the tempo is varied a little bit, maybe a different movement part of the lift, because this is mainly Olympic lifters. So they might be doing, more of a snatch deadlift one day and then a traditional deadlift the other day. There's different ways that you can manipulate the workout in order to change the variables enough that your body is not being pushed to the point of tearing it down so much it can't recover from it.
So it's kind of like that pull-up theory where if you were training an individual and you have them do as many pull-ups as they possibly can, let's just say it's a maximum of 10, well, then the next 2 days, they're still fatigued. They're not able to get as many in. But if you drop that down to, say, 5, well, then they still have a little bit more left in the tank and you can do maybe another 5, or you can spread that 5 out through each one of those days. So they end up getting more reps in throughout the week. Is that kind of what
Yeah. So
saying?
if you're doing, so if 10 is your maximum, first of all, the first repetitions of that 10 are not doing anything, not a stimulus for growth. And so you're not really stimulating growth until you get to that near fatigue level. And so now you push, I want to say almost beyond fatigue, because it's pushing you beyond your own desire to want to do more. And that's why a lot of people really can't do true muscular failure type of exercise, because they end up wussing out before they actually get to a real failure. And when you look at like the level of training that Mike Metzger talks about, and really the level of training they're talking about in this article, is you're doing like drop sets, you're doing forced reps, or maybe negative accentuated kind of work that you need somebody there coaching you, pushing you through it. And you're not stopping when you feel like, okay, I'm getting a little bit sore, I'm getting a little bit fatigued here. And so, especially as we age, I think that really pushing the body so hard that it's going to take you 2, 3, or even a week of training or of recovery in order to be able to train again, that's too much stress on the body. But if we can lower that stress level, but make it so that in 5 repetitions, I'm getting a little bit closer to fatigue, but I'm not really fatiguing. I'm lifting more weight. I'm getting a little bit more value out of that workout, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, kind of.
So in the article, they talk about some of the risks of doing daily training or whole body training every day. And that's another thing to look at too, is when you look at whole body, I look at that as being exercises that are really isolating and stressing every muscle in the body to a point of fatigue. Whereas we may look at workouts where, say, on Monday and Wednesday, the emphasis is more on a leg push. So it's more squatting, but I'm still doing some other whole body exercise, or I'm doing my whole body by squatting, doing exercises that are complex and are using multiple joints. I'm doing more of the whole body, but I do a different exercise the next day. Like my next day might be a little bit more of a lower body pull, where I'm doing more like Romanian deadlifts. And I might still be working all of the body, but I'm doing it to a level that it's able to recover for the next day. And so when we talk about overtraining, I honestly think unless you are a bodybuilder or an athlete that is working very intensely on a regular basis, the risk of overtraining is pretty small. When people overtrain, it's not a matter of they've pushed their body too frequently. It's that they are not managing the stimulus and the recovery effectively. So it's really a matter of poor coaching. It's stupid training. It's not the training itself. So you can train on a daily basis if you train smart and effectively. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Well, because I don't know, I've hit that level of fatigue where I go into a gym and then I'm not as strong as I was, and I don't know what the heck's happening, and I can't do as many reps. And then you literally just take 2 days off, and then you go back in and you do those exact same movements, and you're hitting PRs left and right. And it's a pretty cool feeling. But to get to that level of fatigue where your body's like, I'm tapping out, I've had enough. You really have to train to a super either consistent working out daily, or you're pushing your body beyond what you would think its normal limits are. You're going in with a goal. Does that make sense? No?
Yes and no.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, so when we're looking at what we're doing a whole body workout and we're really pushing hard, you still have to consider how many exercises am I doing? What am I doing in that workout? And am I really pushing the whole body to fatigue with every exercise that I'm doing? Or am I doing exercises that are causing unnecessary fatigue and not really a stimulus for growth? So you might do a lot of sets and a lot of different exercises, but most of those exercises aren't really hitting that minimum effective volume or intensity, then you're causing unnecessary fatigue. So when we look at recoverability, we have to consider what are all the other things that we are doing that might be affecting our recoverability. Because I'll talk about opportunity costs. You have X amount of time in the day and the week to do whatever you want to do that are going to accomplish your goals. And if we're putting things in there that don't effectively move us toward that goal, that's wasted time. And so there may be a lot of exercises that we are doing that are not really stimulating growth, but they're causing unnecessary fatigue. We need to eliminate those. And then that's going to allow us to recover more effectively. And so, what are you doing in a workout? When I talk whole body, I don't necessarily throw a lot of arm curls, any kind of tricep work, even a lot of isolated shoulder work or isolated even leg or leg work like quads and hamstrings. But I'm doing like squats, the basic 5 exercises that we talk about. You could do those on a daily basis, and maybe manipulate the intensities that you're doing, the tempos that you're doing, and you may actually get better volume and more effective stimulus throughout the week if you manage that effectively. If you just go in and go, all in every workout and just push into fatigue and not manipulating the variables, you're probably not going to see as much effectiveness.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging.
Right. Okay. And you also put yourself at risk of injury.
Yeah, and that's another thing they address in the article, the risk of injury. And again, getting injured training is just stupid training.
Right.
So training every day doesn't necessarily increase the risk more. Training to failure on a daily basis is certainly going to put you at a greater risk of getting injured. But I would also argue that there's an increased risk of injury doing a whole body to failure on even just 2-3 days a week, because you're pushing to failure. You're pushing the body beyond its limits. When fatigue sets in, technique sometimes breaks down. And so we might start seeing sloppy reps that could cause injury. And so going to near failure, or just the beginning onsets of failure, may actually limit the risk of injury more so than doing the exercise less frequently.
I don't really know how to respond to that, because I feel like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and I also kind of feel like, well, obviously, Yeah.
And I think, and we'll link this article for the reader to read, because I think it's important to read it in the proper context. A lot of people will see the headline and maybe read just a few paragraphs of it and say, oh, well, I should only be training every other day. And that may not necessarily be the case. You may make that choice and you are understimulating your muscle the way you are training. Now, if you are training very intensely, which is what the article is talking about, and you're pushing that body to the point of volitional fatigue, momentary muscular failure, maybe even beyond, where you're just beating the crap out of your muscle, yeah, you're going to need to recover a little bit. There's a quote in the article from Alex Viada, where he says, failure training has a really, really strong growth stimulus, which it does. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. You push yourself to failure, it's going to stimulate growth. But it also causes a lot of damage. There's a lot of inflammation. The cleanup process takes a long time. So if you train to failure every single day effectively, there is so much damage and so much cleanup to do that your body is constantly in a phase of breaking things down and cleaning out dead protein. And it doesn't actually have enough time to actually devote resources toward rebuilding. And that is 100% accurate. But if we back off and then say, okay, well, we're not training to failure, we're not causing that same level of muscle damage, we're causing just enough damage to stimulate growth and then allowing adequate amount of recovery through proper nutrition, getting a good night's sleep, eliminating a lot of unnecessary activities that might impede on that recoverability, then we may actually be able to see a little bit more growth in a more frequent training. Because one thing that also happens is you're training so hard in just one workout per week. So you have one leg day a week and you just kick the crap out of your legs in that workout. So for the next couple of days, you're sore, you can't move, you can't walk. Eventually you get to that recovery point, and now that stimulus for growth is diminishing. It's trailing off. And you may actually have several days in the week where your body is not growing. Whereas if you go a more frequent training, so rather than doing that, say, 1 day a week training, you go into 2 days a week. Now you have 2 training stimuli. The body is recovering. By the time you get to the next workout, it's primed for another growth stimulus. Well, maybe we manage that stimulus a little bit better so that we're in 3 workouts per week. Again, now we have 3 stimuluses to promote growth, and we give it adequate recovery. Now the body's growing over the full week. Now we maybe split that into 6 sessions. We're getting a daily stimulus, and then there's adequate time for the muscle to recover, and then we get another little stimulus. So it might only be 1 exercise per body part per day rather than multiple exercises per body part per day that will stimulate a little bit more growth. And there's the other factor that comes into play here, and that's time. A whole body workout takes significantly more time. If you're doing 5 sets of 5 whole body, even if you're doing just the 5 core exercises that we talk about, the squat, deadlift, bench press, row, and overhead press. You do 5 of those. That's going to be a total of 125 sets or 125 repetitions of each exercise. And between sets, you want to take at least a minute's rest in between. You start doing the math on that. That's a pretty long workout. That's probably going to take you upwards of close to 2 hours to get through a workout. So now you have to contribute 2 hours, 3 days a week, say, to train. That could be pretty strenuous on our schedules. I know for my schedule, I could never do that. And so for me, by splitting my workouts into 6 sessions per week and doing fewer exercises in those workouts, I can actually accomplish more during the week. I can actually lift a little bit more, but I get it done faster. And so by splitting that up, I can actually maybe do more sets of the exercises, fewer exercises, but do more of cumulatively over the week. Does that make sense?
Less is more. That's basically what I'm hearing.
Well, it's not really less though. That's the thing. It's just your duration of exercise is less, but you're doing it is shorter, but you're doing it more frequently. So again, say I split those exercises up in, if it takes me 2 hours to do a workout 3 times per week, I can pare that down to 1 hour every day is going to be a little bit more manageable. And I can probably recover from that a little bit more effectively.
Well, then at that point, you might as well just do a HIIT training, like an interval training to get an hour and hit that
doing
level.
a HIIT training is depending on your goals. I don't think HIIT training is necessarily the most effective unless you're talking like the Nautilus style high intensity interval training or high intensity training, HIT rather than 2 I's. So if you're talking about kind of Mike Metzger's, Jones's high intensity, 1 set to failure, again, there are challenges with that. Are you getting enough stimulus from that single session? And are you doing it properly and doing it with the right equipment and things like that? So that's possible, but I think there's also a lot more evidence that it's not just simply hitting it, 1 time to failure. It might actually be hitting close to failure more frequently than it might actually give you a better stimulus for growth. So there's a lot of options out there, and I wouldn't say that any one is perfectly right and the other is wrong. Doing the type of training that Mike Metzger did, that's pretty intense, and you may have a little bit more difficulty functioning the rest of your days on training days. So that might not be advantageous to us. So doing more multiple sets might be a little bit better. So you got to take it individually. You have to figure what works for me. What do I like to do? What am I going to do? What do I have access to do? and just do it.
Right. But if you're going to struggle with the level of, I'm super sore on my training days, doesn't that also come down to nutrition that's going to be taken in as
Not
well?
necessarily. You can have really, really good nutrition, but you're doing a workout that kicks your ass, you're going to still feel bad.
Yeah, but eventually your body adapts and gets used to that level of training, right? Through homeostasis.
Okay, so if it gets used to that level of training, now you're no longer in a state of overload. And so the stimulus to adapt is going to be less. Mm. And so what are you going to do next in order to promote a better stimulus for growth? You have to change something in the workout in order for that to occur.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's another thing to consider is the training frequency can actually be a variable that we manipulate over the course of the annual periodization that may affect our growth better. So, you might do a period where you squat every day for, to a 3-week, 4-week cycle. And by the time you get to the end of that cycle, you're pushing maybe a little bit beyond that maximum recoverable volume. And so your body's getting to a point where if I continue to do this for more weeks, I'm going to be overtraining. I'm at risk of injury. I'm at risk of certainly diminishing returns. And so what we want to do is manipulate the workout so that we are kind of moving from a more minimum effective volume. So maybe training every day, we start off 3 sets of a squat exercise, squat variation, every day, 6 days for the first week. The next week we do 4 sets. Following week we do 5 sets. By the time we get into 5 sets every day, our body is now struggling to recover from that, but it's like really, really primed, stimulated to grow. And then we back off from it. We go into a deload week. We may actually see better adaptation. And so it's really just another variable that we can manipulate in the workout to make the workouts more effectively.
The article also states another reason doing full body workout every day can be counterproductive is that it can reduce your overall training volume. Because you're lifting in a weakened state, you won't be able to lift as much in each set. Let's say you do 3 sets of 5 squats with just the bar at 45 pounds every day. That's 675 pounds of squats per workout for a total volume of 4,725 pounds for the week. But if you were fully recovered, you might be able to lift more weight and do more total reps. So instead of 7 workouts, you would do 4 per week and focus on doing 5 sets of 5 reps with just 5 pounds added to the bar. That makes each workout 1,250 pounds of squats with a weekly total of 5,000 pounds. The total volume you lifted in those 4 sessions is higher, and a higher volume workout means more muscle. According to a December 2019 review, the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health.
Yeah, and if you go to that article, and we'll link that link as well, it basically concludes what I was just saying, that a lot of different factors factor in, and there's a lot of different things that you can do in your workout to stimulate growth. And there's the evidence is basically equivocal when it comes to how we train, what's the most effective type of training. But if you look at that math, I don't really agree with that. I would say, doing the 3 sets of squats, I would say do the 3 sets of 5 with the extra 5 pounds on a daily basis is going to give you even more volume. And you're going to be able to do, because you're only doing 3 sets, you should be able to handle that volume. So it's kind of odd that they would say do fewer sets every day with less weight and that's fatiguing you, because you're not necessarily in a weakened state if you have recovered from it. So the key is you do a little bit more in a workout because you can do more weight in the workout, but you do less volume of it per workout, but that volume is spread across the week. So I would say, if I did 3 sets of 5 every day, how many sets is that? And they say 7 days. I would not go 7 days. So the math gets kind of even funkier there. I would go 6 days. So you're doing 18 sets of 5 repetitions in a weekly basis, as opposed to
15 sets.
So you're actually doing a little bit more volume because you're doing more sets over the course of the week, even if you do the same weight. So the math doesn't really add up there. So I would be a little bit cautious of reading that as saying do a little less work. We want to look at what is the total volume we can do in a week and recover from that. And if we divide that volume effectively across the week, we may actually be able to do a little bit more effort because we're not doing as much in a single workout that's going to lead us to fatigue that might cause us not to do all of that workout. Does that make sense? So if I'm doing 5 sets, 5 sets is pretty hard. Now, if the 5th set is hard and I can barely finish that, but chances are those first 4 sets are not stimulating enough growth. Certainly the first 2 or 3 sets are not stimulating any growth. So why not do the last 3 sets, a little bit more weight, get a little bit better stimulus, but be able to recover from it?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. So really to kind of begin to wrap this up, I mean, again, I strongly encourage people to kind of read the article, but the thing to understand is that there is no absolutes when it comes to resistance training. All we do know and can confirm in the literature is that when the stimulus is effective at the cellular level, it's going to stimulate adaptations within the muscle. It's going to stimulate protein synthesis and cause the muscles to grow. We need recovery. We have to be able to recover from whatever stimulus we're producing. And if we can recover and we are fully recovered or near fully recovered by the next workout, then we're going to have an effective training session to stimulate more growth. And if we are not recovered, then we are beginning to overreach, possibly overtraining, and we need to back off a little bit so that the body can actually recover. And so it's really a matter of recoverability from the training stimulus, doing the things that are going to stimulate growth, because the growth is stimulated in the gym, but the growth itself occurs in recovery, occurs in sleep. It occurs in all those hours after or outside the gym when we're not working out and we're doing other activities. What are those activities that we're doing? Are they having a negative impact on our recoverability? So if you're working out in the gym really intensely, and then you are a carpenter or, a construction worker or somebody with a very physical job, that physical job is going to impede on your performance. If you're someone like myself who's a professor that I work out in the morning, I can work out pretty hard, and then I'm basically sitting at a computer or standing in front of a class the entire day, I can recover a little bit more effectively from those workouts than somebody who has other load on their lives that might impact their recoverability.
Which is so strange because I feel like the person that's more active throughout the day is getting more blood flow to the muscles and bringing more nutrients to it. But you're right. The rest and recovery portion is so important and so critical for the body to actually rebuild itself.
Yeah, and there's that whole activity during the day, really looking at kind of your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the calories that are being burned, not in exercise throughout the day. We want a certain level of that that's going to facilitate burning fat, keeping the circulation going so that we are even more effectively stimulating protein synthesis in the muscle. Because if you do a hard workout and you're sitting all the time, it's not going to have quite the same stimulus as if I do a hard workout and then I keep moderately active throughout the day. But it's not going to be good to have a stimulus for growth and then just keep hard stimulating it throughout the day. And so we got to manage that recoverability is, I think, the biggest factor. So for the listener, first thing I would recommend is exercise as often as you can. And for most of us, we have enough difficulty hitting the minimum guidelines. So this idea that we might be overtraining and training too frequently. If you look statistically at the U.S. population, we know that it's, I think, about 23% of the population meets the minimum daily physical activity guidelines. And those daily physical activity guidelines don't even necessarily wholly address resistance training. It's just kind of doing a moderate amount of cardiovascular exercise for about 150 minutes a week, resistance training 2 or 3 times per week. Very few of the population meet that standard. And so if 23% are meeting it, what percentage of that 23% is pushing themselves so hard at the gym that they're not recovering? It's a very small number. You're probably looking at about 1% of the population that this idea of training on a daily basis, whole body training on a daily basis, is going to be detrimental to them. And so for the average person reading this article, don't get your panties in a bunch and say, hey, I'm going to the gym too frequently. You're not going to the gym too frequently. If anything, you're probably not going frequently enough. I think another issue with saying that we should not, we should allow at least 48 to 72 hours between training sessions. If I'm scheduled to lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the gym and I miss my Wednesday workout, I'm less likely than to go in on Thursday and work out because I'm like, well, I can't, I just have to miss that workout because if I work out on Thursday, I can't work out on Friday and it's going to throw my schedule off. And so a lot of people do that. They end up missing entire sessions and they get less stimulus from it. Worst case scenario, you go in, you have 2 or 3 days in a row, you're still getting a stimulus. You're going to get some growth out of that. You're going to get more than if you didn't work out at all. And so train as best and effectively as you can. Increase your training frequency appropriately to the point where you are able to recover, you're managing your time well, and you're hitting the goals and getting the results that you want. And if you train effectively, you will
age well.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.